It's been termed mortgage prison. People who come off fixed rate home loans onto high default rates but are unable to refinance. The reason is the buffer rule enforced on the banks by APRA. Anyone refinancing a loan must prove they can repay the loan if rates rise another 3%. And FOI has revealed the RBA has modelled up to 1 million Australians could be in this position, with already 500,000 in it right now. Joining me is Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones. Thanks very much for your time. It's a huge issue, isn't it? It's stopping people changing banks in many circumstances and getting a lower rate. Is the government looking at this issue?
Well, first thing to say is we've got an independent regulator, and it's important that we do. We've just come off the back of a fortnight where we've seen overseas what happens if you get Parliament interfering with the job of an independent regulator. You reduce prudential standards, it looks all right at the time, and then 4 or 5 years later you see a collapse in a bank with the possibility of contagion into others. So important that we have an independent regulator, and we do, and we have a good one. And the serviceability buffer, 3%, lending rate plus 3%, is there to ensure that somebody can afford their repayments if, in the event, interest rates go up. Now, I think most banks are going to try and work through the issue with their customers to ensure that nobody is left high and dry. But I think the underlying importance of having buffers in place, both on banks for their capital holdings, but on banks in terms of what they're lending to their customers. Look around the world.
Yeah.
Nobody criticises tough prudential standards in the middle of a crisis.
So when you're talking about the risks for the economy that APRA needs to manage, for a new home loan that absolutely makes sense. You want a buffer rule to make sure someone can pay that loan off. For refinancing, that loan's already in the economy. Nothing is going to stop that loan being in the economy. It's whether or not someone can refinance. Wouldn't it make sense to have a different standard for someone who's had the loan, has been paying it off for years, and it's in there anyway, we're not talking about risk, versus a new home loan?
Look, important at this point in the cycle that we don't have politicians, ministers and the Parliament jumping in and telling an independent regulator where and how it should be setting those serviceability buffers. Important that it's open to analysis, something that you're engaging in now. Very important that that occurs. Number one priority, ensuring that we have a stable system. Also ensuring that banks are able to work through with their customers to ensure that they can maintain their property holding and their mortgage.
But a bank's not just going to go out and go, hey, have a reduced rate. People go from a very low, at the moment, they're going from a really low fixed rate, they go to a higher default rate. It's just what happens. Some of them might have a 2% buffer still and they can't refinance. Isn't there something a bit illogical about the lack of competition there?
The discussion I'm having with the banks at the moment is that they want to work with their customers on a customer by customer basis to ensure that they can hang on to their property, that they are able to refinance. So as yet, and I hasten to add, as yet we are not seeing the problem that people are suggesting may emerge, but obviously that's something you keep an eye on.
But it is happening. People are out there unable to refinance.
Yeah, people are able to maintain a mortgage with the institution that they have.
But what they want...
There's lots of reasons, Tom, and you'll be aware, there's lots of reasons why somebody might not be able to move from their current bank to another bank.
All sorts of reasons.
Not the least of which being loan mortgage insurance.
Yeah, loan value ratio, which comes into that, of course. But this is one thing that stands in the way right now. The government is at pains to say we'll do anything we can on cost of living. Is there something you can do here? You've mentioned the independence of the regulator, but you're also the government. Do you think this is something that could be looked at? You can have a discussion with APRA, however it's done, to say this buffer, having exactly the same buffer for a refinancing, doesn't actually make sense compared to a new loan entering the market.
Keen not to knee-jerk, like I said, in the middle of a crisis where right around the world you've got banking systems that aren't as stable and well-placed as ours. But if, as you suggest, this becomes a bigger problem down the track, then obviously a government would look at it. But where we sit right now, stable system, and the problem isn't, as people fear, it may be that people are being thrown out.
When you say, no, but I'm not talking about thrown out right now, but I'm talking about cost of living relief. So when you say it's not a big problem, what are you basing that on? Have you had a discussion around whether a lot of people are trying to do this? How do you ascertain if this is affecting 100,000, 10,000, 500,000 people?
I'm glad you've raised that with me. When I say we are not being presented with a set of numbers that say people are unable to maintain their home loan because of these buffers.
I'm not saying maintain though. I'm saying get a better rate.
Nobody's saying to us, I don't have any information before me at the moment, and I have discussed this with the regulator, no information before me at the moment that says somebody was able to get a home loan last week, but because of they're coming off their fixed rate onto a variable, they're no longer able to do
But it's not getting a home loan, it's refinancing, it's getting a better rate. There wouldn't necessarily be those figures out there, would there? Don't you only know the size of this problem if you try to find out about it? Have you looked into it?
We will look at all of these issues. We're currently looking at a range of other issues in this space, Tom, but we want to ensure, first and foremost, in the middle of a crisis, no knee-jerk responses. And if the problem is, as you paint it, that we've got a big problem burning there, of course, any responsible government would look at it. But as it sits today, we don't see that there is a burning deck there.
Okay, not a burning deck, but if someone is out there right now, there would be. I mean, there would be thousands of people out there right now who'd love to refinance, who wouldn't make the 3% buffer margin. What do you say to them?
As I've suggested, there's a whole heap of reasons why somebody can't refinance.
But there would be people that would be the reason.
I think there's a whole heap of reasons. One of them will also be loan mortgage insurance. Another will be valuation ratios, etc. So I don't want to knee-jerk and point to one and say this is the reason why somebody can't refinance. There could be a bunch of others. Number one objective, ensuring that that person has a mortgage so that they can stay in the house they're in.
Okay. So I guess I'm curious as to whether do you think this is an idea worth visiting, having a discussion over, talking to various, whether it be APRA?
We're having a discussion about it.
And I wish I set policy in the country. I don't have that power just yet. But do you agree there's something inherently...
pretty influential, Tom.
I try my best. Do you agree there's inherently something a bit odd around the refinancing? The 3% buffer will be exactly the same for refinancing, and you might have had a loan for 5 years, or a new home loan entering the market.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, the serviceability buffers were set when interest rates were significantly lower than they were, but there was obviously an anticipation by the regulators that rates would move. From time to time, we can discuss these and other matters with the regulators to ensure that...
Will you raise this with APRA?
I've had discussions with APRA.
On this?
I've had discussions with APRA around serviceability ratios.
But on the refinancing aspect?
On all of the issues that we've discussed, yes, I've had discussions with APRA on it.
Okay. What do they say on the refinancing part?
What they've said to me privately is what they've said publicly. On the information available to them at the moment, they believe that the serviceability ratios, the serviceability buffer, I should say, is appropriately struck.
And that wasn't more of a focus on new home loans though versus refinancing? That the comments, a lot of the push was, well, do we need 3% as an overall buffer? I'm just trying to carve out the refinancing aspect though.
So these are probably questions best put to the regulator themselves, as opposed to having me attempting to, which I won't do, speak on their behalf. They're an independent regulator, and that's the way it should be. We've seen around the world the problem you get into when you get Parliament or politicians.
Well, we had Katie Gallagher on and she said speak to Stephen Jones. Yeah. So I've done that. I'll go next to APRA. We'll see how we go.
Sounds like a solution, Tom.
Stephen Jones, thank you.